Welcome to the long-anticipated review, I guess, of Ultimate Spider-Man. That's right, I'm finally getting around to doing it. But this isn't just some sort of out-of-the-blue thing, what? Totally not that. No, this is because I obviously do Ultimate Spider-Man every 21 videos. So now you know my little secret. Every 21 videos there will be an Ultimate Spider-Man comic. That's my 100% money-back guarantee. Also, make sure you check out my first video on Ultimate Spider-Man by clicking on that long horizontal gray box up in the right. Released in 2001, written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Mark Bagley. This is Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 2. Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. The book opens up in a medical lab. Two men check the readings of a coma patient while they sort of just talk about what they did over the weekend. And one of the nurses says, "It's your turn. Go check out Dr. Octopus. See if he's left us any presents." Yep. This is Otto Octavius. If you remember back to Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1, Otto worked for Norman Osborn in his lab. And when Norman turned himself into the Goblin, Otto was left in the wake of his destruction. Cut to a prep rally at Midtown High School. Peter Parker walks on campus, reading a biography on Iron Man, while Mary Jane and Liz Allen talk about this assignment for their class, where they have to come up with a superhero identity, and Liz is all angry because the teacher said that they can even be mutants if they want. Something Liz really hates. Spoiler alert, her dad's the Blob, gross, and she becomes the Firestar of this universe. So Kenny, aka Kong, asks if anyone is going as Spider-Man, and Flash is like, "Dude, you're so gay for Spider-Man. I'm gonna go as a mutant." A big horny mutant. Flash is then called away, and Kong's like, "You guys think all these superheroes are like a sign of something bad? Like in Ghostbusters. Maybe we should do something about it. Keep an eye out or something." And then Peter gets real angry and he's like, "Yeah, that's what the Germans said to the Jews." Okay. Jesus, going to Hitler already, are we? Then this punk blonde girl enters the conversation, and she leans coolly against the wall and says, "How do you think the dinosaurs felt before the meteor? I mean, that's what's going on here, right?" Then she spouts some of her personal philosophy, and Peter's like, "Whoa, who's that cool, hot punk girl over there?" And Kong asks for her name, and she says Gwen Stacy. And it's her first day at the school. Back at Otto's hospital room, he's greeted by Dr. Hank Pym. Hank asks if he remembers anything that happened before the accident, and he also tells Otto that he can't handle bright lights, so he has to wear the bandaging. Then he tells him that he's been in a coma for 3 months. Later, after he's calmed down, Hank tells him that his arms were fused to his body, and that the scientists monitored the fusion. Then Otto asks where he is, and Pym tells him that that's classified. Otto demands that they take the bandages off, and they comply, and then Otto uses his gross ruined eyes to examine his 4 new appendages and his gross fused torso. Hank's like, so seeing as you're a scientist, we hope you're able to find the possibilities that this accident brought. We can work together on this." And Otto looks at him with his scarred eyes and says, "You're saying you found me like this, and then you left me like this to see what would happen? You could have gotten the arms off, but you decided not to. Who the hell are you?" The scientists say that that is also classified, and Otto gets very angry and attacks with his metallic arms as he demands to know where he is. At Kong's house, Kenny lies on his bed as his parents leaves, and as he stares at the ceiling, he begins to remember his teacher giving the superhero assignment, and how Peter reacted to it. And then his mind jumps to that time Peter woke up in class and broke his desk. Then he continues down that memory path until he gets to Peter getting bitten by that spider on that field trip they took to Oscorp. On the track of spiders, he remembers that spider wrestler that beat the Crusher Hogan, the spectacular Spider-Man. And Kong remembers all the feats that Peter accomplished, like his very successful career on the school basketball team, and that bite. There was that time Flash kicked him in the hall, the bite, and that time he flipped Kong, and the bite, and when the Goblin attack Spider-Man showed up so quickly. Whoa. Cut to Midtown campus. Kong tells Flash that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Yep, Kong figured it out. Flash tells Kong he's out of his mind, and then Liz comes over to see what all the hubbub's about, and Flash brings her up to speed. Then they all look at Peter, and Flash is like, come on. Y'all know he's not Spider-Man. Just look at him. Kong brings up the excellent point about all those desks Peter broke, but Flash dismisses it. So Kenny brings up the time that Peter flipped him and broke Flash's hand, and Flash is like, he got a lucky shot on you, and I just hit him wrong. Hey, remember that game Flash and Kong used to play where they kicked Peter in the ass? Well, Kenny is enticed by Flash to do it, so he runs towards Peter. And as Peter's going through his locker, his spider sense goes off, and he's like, well, the Academy Award for the best performance of a superhero trying to keep his identity goes to me. And then he's kicked in the ass, and he's like, oh, God, why? Why would you do that? What's wrong with you? And then Gwen comes up and asks what the fat boy's problem is, and tells him if he ever does something like that again, she'll stick him like the pig he is, and then she pulls out a fucking knife. Then a teacher comes through and breaks up the crowd as Gwen drops the knife, and then he pulls her away. Cut to some New York street. A robber runs away with a purse, but is almost immediately stopped by Spider-Man. Spider-Man webs him to the ground and gives the purse back to the woman, and then she runs away in terror. Everyone stares at Spider-Man, and then in the crowd he notices J. Jonah Jameson. Spider-Man walks in front of Jonah and says, hey, aren't you the guy that's been printing all that totally made-up garbage about me just to, like, sell newspapers? Well, I have one thing to say to you. I love the paper, it's hysterical. Then he leaps up the wall of the Bugle and swings away. Jonah stands in horror next to Robbie and says he just wants to go inside where it's safe. And as he takes a step, he immediately trips because Spider-Man webs his feet to the ground. Later that night, after having escaped from some government hospital in South Jersey, Otto scales a large skyscraper and smashes through the window. Otto stands in the office room he just broke into and begins to monologue. How do you sleep at night? I'd really like to know. Like a baby, I bet. But I wonder if you realize how evil you truly are. What? Oh, please. Don't insult me with your sleazy used car salesman talk. I know you tried to kill me. It's just all so blurry. I trusted you, and now look at me. Our relationship was based on lies and deceit. You paid me money to give you information that doesn't belong to you. And I did it. We are liars and cheats. I guess you ran out of uses for me. So you tried to destroy me. I know it was you. I just can't remember what you did. Then it's revealed that Otto is actually talking to a painting of a very old man, and Otto vows to take vengeance on him as he begins to tear the painting apart. Cut to Peter watching TV at work. He watches a promo for this reality show starring Kraven the Hunter, who in this universe is like a crazy Steve Irwin instead of a Russian guy. Kraven says he'll be coming to America to hunt the most dangerous game. At the police station, George Stacy is talking to his daughter about what she did in school that day. George wonders what he has to do to get her to snap out of her sullen little phase, and Gwen says that they aren't talking. He's just freaking out, so she goes to leave. George tells her to sit down, but Gwen tells him he never even asked what the context was. And she explains that she pulled out the knife because this total herb was attacking cute little Peter Parker for no reason. No one was doing anything about it, not even the teachers. Then George is alerted that his mom is on the phone, and he's like, what? Mom, hello? Just kidding, it's actually Ben Urich, who is trying to get information on Octavius. But George notices that Gwen is leaving, so he runs out after her, but is stopped by the two federal agents in trench coats. Back at the Bugle, Robbie comes out and says that there is a break-in at Hammer Industries, and that there are reports of a man crawling up the building with mechanical arms, causing Peter to remember Otto's mechanical arms in the lab. So Spider-Man leaps to the side of the Hammer Industries building and eavesdrops on two federal agents as they talk to Justin Hammer. The red-headed agent reveals that she is S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Sharon Carter, and the very southern Justin Hammer asks, why S.H.I.E.L.D. be sending a couple of young bucks to investigate a break-in? Then he tells his assistant to leave, and Agent Carter asks if he knows who Otto Octavius is, but Hammer says he's never met him. The agents exposit about Otto, but then Hammer sees Spider-Man's head peeking over the window, and the agents turn around, aim their weird guns, and shoot fucking like incendiary bullets, I guess, at Spider-Man. Later at the airport, Kraven arrives to a massive crowd of reporters. Someone asks him why he's there, and Kraven says, I'm here to hunt a one of a kind species.
I'm here to hunt the one you call Spider-Man.
What are you gonna do to him when you find him?
Oh, I'm gonna kill him with me bare hands.
At the Parker residence, Peter watches Kraven make this statement on TV as Aunt May comes down to say goodbye and leaves. 1 week later, in history class I guess, the principal brings Gwen into class and says her father, the police captain, guaranteed that there will be no more incidents. Then Gwen apologizes and she sits down and the principal leaves, and then Gwen says that the chubby load over there needs to apologize to Peter. They argue and the teacher tells them to shut up, and then class continues. Cut to Justin Hammer's limousine. Hammer talks to a scientist about the development of superhumans, and it's revealed that Hammer sold Electro to Fisk. And then Hammer asks about the Sandman project, and the scientist says that they're having a few minor bumps in the road, and it cuts to this horrifying photo of Flint Marko, aka the Sandman Project. At the harbor, a press conference for the new energy project called the Dome Project, which is like an offshore alternate energy facility. Justin Hammer begins to speak as he brings up this live feed of the lab on the big screen behind him. Hammer gets a question from a reporter from the Daily Globe named Eddie Brock, and as he answers it, Octavius appears at the facility and violently murders the staff behind him. Ben Urich asks Hammer what his relationship to Otto Octavius is, and Hammer says that there is none. And then he turns around in horror to see Dr. Octopus staring into the camera at them. Meanwhile, at Midtown, the principal tells the students that Kraven the Hunter will be filming in their school when he's alerted about the attack at the dome. And in the crowd of students, Mary Jane tells Peter to go. Police helicopters circle the dome while Spider-Man hangs on to one of them, and he swings down and around, but the police start firing at him, causing Spidey to fall into the facility right in front of Doc Ock. Octopus smacks him around with his tentacles and grabs Spidey by the throat, and he's like,
"What the hell is this?"
Then Spidey claps his ears and kicks him in the jaw, knocking off his glasses, and Spider-Man's like, "Hate to break it to you, but your screwed up eyes are the least of your problems. First of all, what's with the green jumpsuit? Where did you even get that?" So it's either two separate pieces of outfit, a green shirt with matching green pants, or it's just a single bodysuit that he cut in half. Anyway, Spider-Man webs his tentacles, but it's easily broken, and Peter gets his ass kicked by Ock as he makes fun of his hair. Octopus grabs Spidey by the wrists and begins to choke him, and Peter realizes he's not going to be able to fight him because he's quickly losing consciousness. Suddenly, one of Doc's tentacles creates tasers, because these arms have the ability to morph into different things, and sends Spider-Man flying out of the building and onto a dock. Later, he finally awakens to find he's surrounded by SWAT. Then Spider-Man leaps off the dock and swims away as he's chased by Scuba SWAT. Luckily, he takes off his shirt and escapes and makes it to land. Later, Mary Jane helps Peter recover in his basement as they watch Hammer speak about Otto and Spider-Man, who Hammer suggests is working with Dr. Octopus. Mary Jane tells him to forget about the spider slander, and then she suggests maybe taking a fighting class or something. And Peter's like, "No one does this to Captain America or Iron Man. Just me. Every time." Then they talk and MJ says that he should skip school tomorrow so he can heal, and that Kraven is also going to be there. Peter says that Colin will just start telling everybody that he's Spider-Man again if he doesn't show up, and then MJ tells him that she'll come over and sew him a new costume, and then they kiss, and MJ heads home. Then Peter sits there and recaps to himself. First, there's the crazy former scientist with giant metal arms who may or may not remember that Peter is the one who got bitten and therefore basically knows his identity. Some cheesy TV show host who wants to hunt him? What is that? And there's the police, they're also looking for him. And the government agents, of course. Also, he lost his costume. Then Aunt May comes home and walks down the stairs. Peter somehow sneaks out of the basement doors and upstairs to the bathroom where he falls on the floor, and Aunt May asks if he is okay, and Peter says, yeah, it's bad poops. The next day at school, the TV production is getting ready to film in the cafeteria. Then Kraven walks through the cafeteria and over to a big hole in the wall that's boarded up, and he starts smelling it to get a scent, and he turns and makes eye contact with Peter. Kraven follows his nose wherever it goes through the cafeteria, and he's acting like this badass hunter who's stalking his prey, and then Gwen says, "Hey, is it just me or does he smell vaguely like kitty litter?" And then Kraven turns around and just fucking stares her down. After school, MJ finishes the spider top for Peter, and she asks what he thinks of that Gwen girl, and Peter's like, yeah, she's alright, kinda screwy, don't you think? But she's a lot more interesting than anyone we know, so there's that. Then MJ goes to leave, and Peter asks if she's mad at him, but she says no, and she leaves. At Hammer Industries, Justin Hammer walks into an elevator and heads up to his office, where he finds Spider-Man sitting on his desk. He quickly webs up the guards and the assistant before he tells Grand Moff Tarkin to be quiet. Peter's like, what, trying to, like, divert the attention from Dr. Octopus trying to kill you by trash-talking me?
Actually, yes, I was.
Then Spider-Man says Hammer is on his own when it comes to Doc Ock, but then Hammer asks how much it'll cost for Spider-Man to protect him from the
Doctor with the arms.
And Spider-Man's like, oh, fuck off. I would have done it for free if you weren't a dick. And then he swings away. Then Hammer gets a call from the scientist leading the superhuman experiments, and Hammer asks why he's wasting his time, but the scientist just stares blankly at him. And Hammer's like,
hello? Doctor, can you hear me?
Hammer moves closer to the monitor as something drips from the scientist's mouth. Then his body is pulled back and it's revealed that it's being puppeted around by a metal tentacle that's thrust through his chest. Then Dr. Octopus appears on the screen and Hammer asks what Doc wants from him. Then Otto basically tells him to go to Hammer's genetics lab in New Jersey. So they do, and Spider-Man hitches a ride on the roof. The limo arrives to find the press already there, and standing at the center of it all is Otto Octavius. So the limo pulls up to the crowd, but the assistant yells at the driver to get them out of there, which leads to Doc Ock ramming an arm through the chest of the driver, lifting the car into the air before he's hit in the face with webbing. Then Spider-Man leaps onto the scene and kicks him in the face and makes fun of his haircut again. As Otto tries to get the webbing off, he turns and one of his arms turns into a fucking gun that shoots. Spider-Man fights Ock's seemingly never-ending arms as it's broadcasted by all the different news stations. Unfortunately, Spider-Man is coiled up by an arm, while another activates the tasers, and it's about to blast him with the bolts of electricity when he webs it, causing the electricity to flow back through the arm and into Ock, freeing Spider-Man. Ock makes his way to the limo where the assistant tries to help Hammer, and as Doc is about to kill them, he's pantsed by Spider-Man. The embarrassment of people seeing his tidy whities allows Spider-Man to gain the upper hand, and Otto is clocked in the face before Spider-Man tackles him to the ground where he webs Otto's head to like the parking lot and breaks off one of the arms. A reporter named Tracy Hale begins reporting that Otto Octavius has been subdued by Spider-Man and that she will attempt to get a statement, but then Kraven the Hunter shows up in full Kraven garb, and he confronts Spider-Man and he's like,
"Our time has come, insect. Our battle is now."
Then Spider-Man brushes him off and goes over to the limo to check on Hammer and the assistant tells him that she thinks Hammer died from a heart attack. Spidey's like, hey, lion guy, I'm gonna rip the door off. Can you grab the girl? What are you doing?
We will do battle.
Are you kidding me? Then Kraven pounces at Spider-Man, but Spidey is able to dodge all of his attacks, and then he uppercuts him, sending Kraven flying into his bus, rendering him unconscious. And Spider-Man's like, I told you not to do that. You all saw him. You all saw me tell him not to do that. Then he helps the assistant out of the limo and she hugs him and thanks him. And then the crowd begins to clap for him. Then the reporters asks why Spider-Man helped Hammer even after he was trashed by him in the press. And Spider-Man says that has nothing to do with this. It's just sad that someone had to die for no reason. Then the reporter says that maybe if he just talked to the press, they could set some things straight about Spider-Man. He says, I'm just like this guy over here. I fell into some powers and I'm trying to do what I can so that people like that don't try to hurt the people like you. But why wear the mask? I want to do what I can, but I have family and friends, and I don't want to put their lives in danger. People might have a hard time trusting me, but I have a hard time trusting people who wear beer hats. And people like that J. Jonah Jameson guy who used me to sell papers by trashing the crap out of me, I just don't care. Because a guy a whole lot smarter than any of us told me that with power comes a great deal of responsibility. And that goes for everyone. Then he swings away, and Kraven is arrested by the police, and S.H.I.E.L.D. arrives for Otto and to secure the genetics lab. Later, Peter arrives home in the middle of the night and he slowly opens the door to find Aunt May waiting for him. May asks why he's coming home at 3 in the morning, and Peter says that he was waiting for a train because he was, at the Daily Bugle. But May says that she called the Bugle and they said he hadn't come in all week. Peter tells her that people probably just didn't notice him because he's just the kid. Then Aunt May demands he tell the truth, and Peter says he was with MJ and he just didn't want her to get mad. Then Aunt May says, Mary's house was the first place I called. She said you were at the library. Then after some scolding, she grounds him. No more Bugle, no more Mary Jane Gigglethons in the basement. And then they argue and Peter storms off, while May sits at the table. Then he walks into his room and turns on his TV to find a positive news report about Spider-Man. He's like, finally, a big-time superhero. And I'm grounded. Cut to a secret S.H.I.E.L.D. facility. Agent Carter and the other agent overlook Doc Ock in his new cell, and then they walk away and Otto begins to mumble,
A Spider-Man. A little spider on his shirt. Spider powers. Spider-Man with spider. Oh, no. Hello. I know who he is. I know who Spider-Man is. His name is Parker. His name is Parker.
Cut to the New York streets. 5 criminals on rollerblades tases a crowd of people and steals their money and valuables. As the leader is making his getaway, he runs into a web wall. And then Spider-Man swings in before he subdues all of the criminals and swings away. He lands on the roof of his school and puts on his civvies while he races to class. Later in the halls, Peter and MJ are talking, and MJ tells him that she watched the whole thing and also that Kraven's show got canceled. They talk some more and head out to the football field as Peter tells MJ that he got grounded for being out all night. Peter says that they can't hang out until the grounding is lifted, and he might have to stop being Spider-Man for a little while. Then Peter's like, will you wait for me? Like he's in fucking prison. And MJ says that she'll go over anyway, but Peter tells her no, because he wants to respect Aunt May's decision. Then MJ says that they'll just have to make out under the bleachers instead when she looks behind Peter to see Harry Osborn. If you remember in Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1, Harry moved away after his dad turned into a giant monster called the Green Goblin and killed his mother in a giant fire at his mansion. MJ and Peter quickly rush to greet him, and Harry tells them that he's going back to school in Midtown. Then our whole cast of characters conveniently gathers around Harry. Flash is like, hey, where's my hug? No hug for you, because unlike you, Peter and Mary Jane actually wrote me and called me, because they're actually my friends. Then he makes Flash question his sexuality. Then Gwen introduces herself, and Harry says, hey Peter, my father wants you to come over for dinner tonight. Dun dun dun! The last time we saw Osborn, he was the Goblin, and he fell into the river after a duel with Spider-Man atop a bridge. And Harry had to move away with like his aunt or something. Peter says he's grounded, and Harry laughs at the idea, but then he says that he'll tell his dad like some other time. After school, Peter leaps over the rooftops thinking about what he's going to do, especially since Norman Osborn knows Peter is Spider-Man. He arrives home to find a limousine parked outside his house, and he walks inside and finds Aunt May and Osborn's assistant. May tells him that Osborn invited Peter to dinner with him and Harry, and Peter's like, but I'm grounded. May says it's fine because Harry's back in town, and then the assistant says, Mr. Osborn says to bring your knapsack, so bring your knapsack as well. And Peter reluctantly goes along with it and nervously rides in the limo. Peter arrives, and Harry brings him inside, and they ride up the elevator as they catch up some more. They get to the penthouse, and Peter finds an indoor shark aquarium. Then he looks at the TV and sees reports of Spider-Man fighting Ock. Then, from the shadows, Norman Osborn appears and says, I've watched these clips so many times this weekend. I thought I was gonna burn a hole in the TiVo. How do I look? Better or worse? Sure hope you got it out of your system. Got what out of my system? This Spider-Man crap. You're done. What's going on here? How are you alive? What's going on here is I own you. You're you. Because of me. You know it. I know it. You're done. As for how I'm alive, I've evolved. Then he stabs himself in the neck with a big-ass syringe and turns into the Goblin. The Goblin looms over Peter and says,
"Okay, just so we know who's in charge.
Dad, it's here!
Be right
Be right there, Harry.
Poor Harry. Everyone around him has secret identities, and he has no clue about any of it."
Then Norman explains that he sends Harry to hypnotic memory repression sessions with Dr. Warren. Then Norman turns himself back into his human form and continues his monologue. Maybe one day when he's ready, he'll find out. But for now, it's our little secret. Because from this day forward, you belong to me. You work for me. You do as I say. And for that, you will be rewarded. There may be some things you don't agree with, but you will obey me. Because if you do not, well, first I will torture and possibly murder your dear auntie. I'll probably do it in front of you. Or maybe I'll destroy that girlfriend of yours. Mary Jane, right? So, Pete, do we understand each other? Good. Let's go. Then they go out into the living room where Harry has a VHS tape of a Dateline episode on Norman. They watch it and then Peter begins to freak the fuck out and runs away. He arrives at home and May asks how it went and Peter says it stank. And May says that she shouldn't have made him go. But then Peter apologizes for being out all night and lying to her and May says it's okay. And then they hug. Later in the basement, MJ calls Peter and she asks what's going on, but they're interrupted when knocking comes from the basement doors. Peter looks up in fright and tells MJ that there's someone there. At 11 at night, Peter slowly walks to the doors when they suddenly open to reveal Gwen, who asks if he wants any Girl Scout cookies, and then she says, no? Then is it okay if I kill myself on your front lawn? Then she walks into his basement, and Peter says that he'll have to call MJ back, and Gwen's like, sorry I ruined your phone sex. Nice boxers, by the way. Peter runs upstairs to tell Aunt May that there's a girl in his basement, and May's like, a real one? Fuck it. Damn, May, that's harsh. Peter's like, what? No, it's this, like, weird girl, Gwen Stacy from school, and she just, like, showed up out of nowhere. How did she find my house? She, like, said her mom ran off to Chicago, and her dad's at work, and I don't know. I think she's, like, hurting herself or something. Then Aunt May puts on her bathrobe and tells Peter to put some pants on before heading downstairs. So May makes them some scrambled eggs when George Stacy shows up and thanks her for keeping an eye on Gwen. The next day at school, Peter tells MJ what happened, and MJ asks why he thinks Gwen went to his house. Peter says he has no idea. Then, as he's about to explain more about the Osborns situation, Gwen runs up and hugs him and says, my own personal superhero. Gwen says that after they left, she and her dad talked for a long time, and like, she could tell him later about it if he cares. Also, she tells him that he and his aunt rock. Then she looks at Mary Jane and she's like, hold on to this one, MJ. Solid gold. And then over the loudspeaker, Peter is alerted to go to a certain classroom. At the classroom, Peter meets with the counselor, Dr. Bradley, from Volume 1, and she starts revealing things that no counselor should know, like his trip to the Osborn penthouse, and Norman's new abilities, and if Norman is aware Peter is Spider-Man. Peter starts freaking out and demands to know what's going on, and then Bradley looks at the window and says, do you want to take it from here, sir? Peter looks at the window as well and sees the space in front of him begin to distort. Then Nick Fury appears. Fury introduces himself as he quickly becomes visible. Fury says that with Osborn rearing his head again, it's time for them to talk. Nick tells Peter that Osborn is going to have him kill him, and if he refuses, Osborn will kill anybody Peter cares about. Fury explains that the Oz Project, what made the Goblin, was created for S.H.I.E.L.D. to create a new super soldier serum, which is like the crux of the entire Ultimate Universe. Oscorp was one of the few companies competing for the contract, and his presentations were very flashy and very perfect, while his formulas were a mess of rushed process. So Fury cut ties to Oscorp. Now Osborn's angry at everyone but himself for what he has done to his home, his company, and his mind. Peter asks why they don't just arrest him or something, so Fury tells him that that's not how it works, and that the reason he's there is to tell Peter that he's on his own. S.H.I.E.L.D. can't touch Osborn until he actually does something. Fury tells him that S.H.I.E.L.D. will be watching and waiting, but the very second Osborn crosses the line into threaten a civilian, S.H.I.E.L.D. will be there to back Peter up. Peter's like, and what if you're not there? We will be. And what if you're not? We will be. Then Peter leaves and sees MJ and Harry in the halls, but runs away. At Peter's house, the limousine is back, and May says that Osborn invited them into the city for dinner. Peter, takes him aside and says he really doesn't want to go, and that Osborn is not a nice man, and he might be a criminal and is really shady. And then May says, never met a man with money who hadn't stepped on someone to get it. An old Uncle Ben proverb. May tells the assistant that they'll have to take a rain check on the dinner and maybe another time. Later, Peter swings through the city and he finds the Goblin perched on the rooftop.
I thought I told you to throw that costume away.
I thought you drowned in the East River. Guess we're not as bright as we think we are, huh? Peter says that he wants nothing to do with Norman and asks why he even wants Peter. Goblin says,
Circles, circles of life, circles of death, circles of hell, circles of pain, circles of responsibility.
Oh man, whatever. You steroid using, nuttier than a fruitcake junkie. Then Goblin tells him that he will learn what responsibility means and jumps off the roof. Below them, Mary Jane exits a limo and is met by Harry, but she's snatched up by the Goblin. Mary Jane screams in horror as Harry and Spider-Man both look on. Flashback time. 20 minutes prior, Norman enters his office, grabs his Oz syringe, and dons his cloak. Then he goes up to the rooftop and injects himself. He falls to the ground, hunched over, writhing in pain, as the voices make themselves known.
Mutant will celebrate at all temperature. Of S.H.I.E.L.D.
The Goblin sits on the rooftop and watches the spectral forms dance around him, and then Spider-Man arrives.
I thought I told you to throw that costume away.
I thought you drowned. We're not as bright as we think we are, huh?
So I take it you'll choose the road most bloody.
The spider creature speaks to him through his hair-covered red and blue skin as his insectoid eyes stare blankly at Norman.
I love you. Kill him. Skin him. Kiss him. I'll cure him. Maintain him.
Then the Goblin leaps off the roof with the spirits in tow. Cut to Spider-Man chasing the Goblin across the city towards the bridge. Oh shit, oh fuck, it's the bridge. We all know how this went last time a Goblin took Peter's girlfriend to a bridge. The Goblin stands atop the bridge with Mary Jane as Peter pleads for him to stop. Peter tries to get through to him, but Norman's seen fucking ghosts, and he's fucking insane, so it doesn't work. Then the Goblin throws Mary Jane Watson off the bridge. Peter dives after her as S.H.I.E.L.D. helicopters begin to open fire on the Goblin. Mary Jane plummets towards the water and Spider-Man tries to gain speed to catch up. They're running out of time as MJ gets closer to the water by the second, so Peter shoots a webbing at her ankle right before she hits the waves like concrete and swings her back up into his arms. He lands on the bridge and sets Mary Jane down, but she's unresponsive. Then he cradles her body in silence. On the bridge, MJ luckily wakes up having fainted, and then they look up to see an explosion from the top of the bridge. Peter has a very helpful cab driver take MJ as far away from the bridge as possible. Then the Goblin shoots his weird fire powers at the helicopters, but then Spider-Man swings in and punches him in the face. He kicks Norman, knocking him down before Peter just starts wailing on him and says, "I won't let you hurt anyone anymore!" And then the Goblin grabs Peter by the throat and begins choking him out before he hurls him back off the bridge, allowing the helicopters to again fire upon him. Peter webs to the side of the bridge and swings back around as the Goblin flees over the cars. When he finally gets situated, Peter looks off and sees Norman being chased by 2 helicopters in the distance. And holy fuck, that moon is massive! It's so huge! Anyway, Norman makes his way back to the penthouse where he retrieves another syringe of Oz. But Harry finds him, and he asks what the monster did to his father, but then the Goblin says,
Salad door.
and Harry falls unconscious. Then Norman injects himself again and grows even bigger and gains even more power. Look, he's like fucking glowing, and his horns are even bigger, and he's literally smoking, just like a goblin. Then Spider-Man appears behind him and says, I hope you don't think I'm gonna let you drive home like that. Hello, you still in there? Can you even hear me, you junky freak? This ends tonight. I'm not scared of you, one way or another, tonight. Then Goblin charges Spider-Man, but he's uppercutted twice, and Spider-Man is grabbed by the ankle and thrown through the shark tank, and water splashes on Harry's face, awaking him. Peter attempts to catch his breath, but the Green Goblin grabs his head like he's palming a fucking basketball. Then Harry awakens to see a giant demon strangling Spider-Man, whose mask is ruined, revealing his identity. Peter begins blacking out as the Goblin slowly crushes his neck and throat, and a dying shark suffocates at his feet. Then Harry finally gains his senses and assesses the situation the best he can and says, Dad? Is that you? What did you do, Dad? Oh my god, Peter! Then Peter is able to get a kick in, and he shoots the Goblin with webbing. Peter lobs a desk at him, but the Goblin just like tosses it out of the window, causing Peter to have to race over towards it so he can catch the falling debris. As he does so, the Goblin goes to grapple him, and again begins to choke Spidey. Then Harry stabs his monstrous father in the back with a piece of sharp debris. Norman swings around and finds Harry, and Harry stands there waiting for his death. But then, the Goblin begins to bubble like a fucking gremlin, and he falls to the ground and turns back to normal. Harry falls to his knees, and Peter says, Harry, Peter? Why are you? When did I? It's just something, And then he falls unconscious. Suddenly, S.H.I.E.L.D. agents jetpack inside, and like Fury levitates down or something, and he orders a cleanup of the building and to have Carter deal with the cops. Then an agent gives him the thumbs up that Norman is still alive, and Fury tells him to take care of it. Nick walks over to Peter, who is sitting down by a sleeping Harry, and asks if they'll arrest him. Fury tells him,
No, we don't do that. We'll deprogram him with hypnotherapy and get him back to a normal life. Hey, told you we'd be here when it happened.
And Peter just looks at him like, you son of a bitch. Then Fury orders an agent to get Peter a new set of clothes, and he asks Peter if he wants some gum before confirming that Mary Jane is safe in Queens. Then he tells Peter,
Listen, you're still young, it's gonna be hard to explain this, but the less you tell your girlfriend, the better. Every time you confide in her, you're inadvertently risking her life. My recommendation to you is enjoying your youth. You're too young for the big boys, kid. You'll have plenty of time later.
No. I don't think I want to be any part of this big boys world of yours.
It's not like you have a choice, kid. You're an illegal, unnatural genetic mutation. You turn 18, you belong to me. That's how it works. Unless you turn yourself into a menace, then I guess things will change.
And Peter stares at him with the blankest of stares. All of his hopes and dreams are dead. They have been crushed under Fury's boot. Then Peter runs away and swings out into the city. He swings to the abandoned warehouse meetup that he and MJ have, and he finds her there, and she runs out and hugs him, and she tells him she just wanted to go home, but she did what Peter said, I guess, and go to this shitty fucking warehouse where she could have been mugged, or much worse. Peter asks why she was at the Osborn residence, and she said that she thought he'd be there. Then he's like, but I told you about Harry's father. I told you he was— You didn't tell me anything! You told me you thought he was that monster! You didn't say you knew! Then MJ asks what happened to Harry, and Peter sits on a barrel and says, he's gone again. What happened? I don't want to talk about it just yet, but please. But then they both sit in silence, staring away from each other in this warehouse. The end.